zones, in part because of the materials that were available in that climate zone, and in part because of the cultural context, because of the people who developed the buildings had specific purposes for those structures. We want to do some analysis of building. We want to look at design and shape. We want to understand construction of basic building forms, understand why buildings are used. Different buildings have different purposes, and that's certainly going to hook back into the VREMs when we realize that, for example, a school building is there for a particular purpose, and it has a time period when it's intended to be active and a time period when it's intended to be dormant or non-active. And then we also want to think about orienting the building in the environment. Its orientation, north, south, east, west. It's, you know, in terms of just elevation within the ground, how it's situated on the side of a hill. We want to think about it in terms of lighting. So we want to really get a sense for the design that occurs when buildings are put together. So the second part of this, kind of these two large topics, is this idea of energy. And we have to also get down to an understanding of what energy is and why we use it. And a similar framework has been generated here. We've had this tour of the building. We've gotten to peek into some of these rooms where energy systems are, but now we want to go back and take another look at those energy systems and understand all of the energy flows that are coming into our building. And then we want to do this other kind of this retrospective again, heating through time. How did we get from very simple fireplaces, right, which is an extremely basic concept that then becomes very sophisticated when we get to central heating. And then also this idea of cooling a space, from passive cooling through just openings in the wall to the kind of air conditioning that we have today. Then we want to take it a step further, right? We've got a basic understanding of how this technology is developed through time, and we want to look specifically at some of the technology that we're dealing with in the school, chillers and boilers, electrical lighting, and then we also want to talk about, and this is an important connection piece, how do we control it? How do we control the energy that comes in and out? And we're going to find out that that's a place of some potential for us. So in terms, and then we want to move into looking at energy consumption. We can assess energy consumption, and because of the VREM system, hourly, daily, weekly. We can get monthly readings from the companies and also look annually at what is our energy usage. What does it look like? And there's a lot of graphing work that can be done with this, both in analysis and in creation of graphs. We want to understand the idea of demand. We want to understand peak demand, because clearly, as Mike was telling us, peak demand plays a tremendous role in the amount that we're paying for our energy. Now, we talked a little bit about buildings, and now we're looking at energy costs, and now we kind of want to put the two together and try to understand how it is that in our building, this interplay of the building envelope or structure and energy impact and influence one another. So this is another further assessment of the building that includes looking at walls and insulation, where doors and windows are found, size of those. Again, orientation, because that does certainly impact heating and cooling in the building, roofs, and then maybe even taking a look at some building plans to get a larger vision of the school. So now we want to get down to the behavioral aspect. So we've got these school systems. How are they managed? Who's responsible for them? And how can we engage with people who are responsible for managing them? And also, how can we adapt our behaviors to begin to adjust and reduce our energy usage? Lastly, we want to look at sources of energy, because it's one thing to say that we use a certain amount of energy. Then we've got to look at, well, where is that energy coming from anyways? It's not always coming from the same source, right? We've got nuclear energy, we've got coal plants, and so we want to think about, okay, we use this amount of energy, but now in the larger context, again, let's try to understand how the kind of energy that we're utilizing creates its own footprint on the Earth. Lastly, and it's again kind of coming back full circle to this idea of the place that we find our building in is the climate zone that we're in has significant impacts too on the kind of usage we get out of our energy systems and how we use our building and our energy systems to either use or waste energy. Carol's going to talk a bit about the behavioral aspect. She'll talk about lessons, but there's a, getting the students engaged was really important to us. All of these, this framework is about the concepts we want to get across, but if we're not actually changing behavior, I feel we haven't really done our job. That's a key component in the VREM system and the educational curriculum we want to put around it. So I'd like to introduce Carol Timms, who's going to speak a little more deeply about